Jason sat in his small, cluttered apartment, staring at the empty screen of his tablet. The day had been long, and he was tired of the same old routine. Work, food, chores. There was never any time for fun or excitement. He had heard about the new service that delivered robot maids to help with everyday tasks, and for once he felt like giving it a try. He had seen the ads everywhere, sleek robots that could clean, cook, and handle any household task. It was all so futuristic, so convenient. Jason was ready for that kind of help. With just a few taps on his tablet, he placed his order for a robot maid. He didn't care which model arrived as long as it did the job. All he wanted was something or someone to make his life easier. The delivery was set for the next day. Jason looked around at his apartment, a mess of clothes, empty coffee cups, and scattered papers. He could already imagine how nice it would be to have someone else do all this work. He smiled, feeling a little lighter. Maybe this was just the change he needed. The next morning, Jason woke up early, excited. He quickly showered, made a cup of coffee, and sat down to wait. He checked his tablet for the delivery status, and it showed that the maid was scheduled to arrive in the next few minutes. He stretched out on the couch, eager to see what his new helper would be like. As the doorbell rang, Jason jumped up from the couch and rushed to the door. He opened it, expecting to see a sleek robot standing there, ready to help. But what he saw instead made his heart skip a beat. There, standing in the doorway, was not a robot, but an alien girl. She was tall, at least 6 feet, and her skin was a deep shade of violet, glowing softly in the morning light. Her eyes were large and luminous, a pale blue that seemed to shimmer with an almost unnatural light. Her hair was long, flowing, and seemed to shimmer with every movement, like strands of liquid silver. She wore a simple tunic made of a smooth material Jason didn't recognize, and she stood there, looking at him with a calm yet curious expression. Jason blinked. This was not what he had ordered. Can I help you?" Jason asked, confused. He glanced down at his tablet to double-check the delivery details, but it confirmed that a maid had been sent. The alien girl tilted her head slightly, as if studying him. "Greetings. I am Lyra. I have arrived to assist you with your household tasks," she said in a soft, melodic voice that sounded almost too perfect. There was a pause, as if she was waiting for him to say something. Jason stared at her, still processing what was happening. "Wait a minute," Jason stammered. "You're my maid?" His mind was racing, trying to figure out what was going on. Lyra smiled gently. "Yes, I have been assigned to you. I am here to help with your chores as you requested." Jason blinked again, trying to make sense of the situation. "But you're not a robot. You're an alien." "I am not a robot," Lyra confirmed, her expression unchanged. "I am a biological entity, but I have been designed to assist with various tasks." Jason stood there in silence for a moment, trying to process her words. His eyes drifted down to her strange appearance. Everything about her felt so alien, so different from what he had expected. But her calm demeanor made him hesitate to argue. Maybe she was part of a new program. Maybe this was some kind of advanced technology he didn't understand. "Okay. This is weird," Jason muttered to himself, scratching the back of his head. "But you can still clean and cook, right?" Lyra nodded. "Yes, I am equipped to perform those tasks and more. My abilities extend beyond basic housework. I can assist you in a variety of ways." Jason was still in shock, but part of him was intrigued. A maid who could do more than just clean. That sounded like something straight out of a science fiction movie. "Well, if you're sure you can help, I guess we can start with cleaning." "The place is a mess," Jason said, stepping aside to let her in. He tried to push aside the strange feeling in his chest, focusing on the fact that his apartment was a disaster. Lyra stepped into the apartment, her movements smooth and graceful. She took a moment to survey the space, her eyes scanning the cluttered room. Then, without a word, she walked to the nearest pile of dirty clothes and began folding them neatly. Jason watched, still unsure how to react. For a moment, it felt as though everything had gone back to normal. Lyra worked in silence, moving effortlessly around the room, picking up discarded items and putting them in their proper place. Jason stood in the doorway, watching her with a mixture of curiosity and disbelief. This was no ordinary maid. She didn't just clean, she moved with an elegance and precision that was almost otherworldly. "So, where are you from?" Jason asked, breaking the silence. "I am from the planet Zinthar," Lyra replied, her voice calm and even. "It is located in the Andromeda Galaxy far from here." Jason's eyes widened. "The Andromeda Galaxy? That's millions of light years away. How did you get here?" Lyra looked up from her work, meeting his gaze. "I was sent here through advanced technology. My species has mastered space travel and interdimensional travel. I was chosen to come to your world as part of an experiment to learn more about human culture and technology." Jason's mind raced. He had read about aliens, of course, but hearing about one right in front of him was a whole different experience. "So, you're like a scout? Sent here to observe us?" Lyra nodded. "That is correct. My mission is to assist and observe. In exchange, I am learning about your species, your ways of life, and your technologies. I am here to help, but I am also learning." Jason processed her words, still not entirely sure how to feel about the situation. He had always imagined aliens to be dangerous or mysterious, but Lyra seemed harmless. She wasn't aggressive, and she wasn't demanding anything from him. She was just doing her job. "Well, that's a lot to take in," Jason said, rubbing his temples. "But I guess if you're really here to help, you can start by fixing my kitchen. I don't know how, but I always end up with a mess in there." Lyra gave a slight nod and walked toward the kitchen. As she moved, Jason couldn't help but watch her. There was something mesmerizing about the way she moved, almost like she was gliding across the floor. It was like nothing he had ever seen before. Jason had never expected his life to take such an unexpected turn. After the alien girl named Lyra showed up at his door, his days had become a mixture of confusion, curiosity, and strange fascination. He had always been a practical man, focusing on his work, keeping things straightforward. But now, every time he looked around his apartment, it felt like something out of a science fiction novel. Lyra, the alien maid, worked tirelessly without a word of complaint. From cleaning the floors to organizing his kitchen, she had already done more in a single morning than Jason could accomplish in a week. Her movements were fluid and graceful, almost like a dancer. Her violet skin shimmered as she moved, and Jason couldn't help but wonder if there was something more to her than just a maid. She was, after all, an alien from a far-off galaxy. Jason's initial hesitation had slowly started to fade. As the hours passed, he found himself becoming more comfortable with her presence. She wasn't like the cold, emotionless robots he had imagined when he ordered a maid. There was something different about her, a warmth, an intelligence in her eyes that suggested she wasn't just a machine following orders. "So, you're from Zinthar, right?" Jason asked as he watched her clean the countertops in the kitchen. He figured it was best to get some answers now that he was beginning to trust her more. Lyra paused, turning toward him with her soft blue eyes. "Yes, I am from Zinthar. It is a peaceful planet, far from the conflicts that often plague your world. My people have learned to live in harmony with each other and the universe around us." Jason raised an eyebrow. "Harmony? Sounds too good to be true. I thought most aliens in stories were either warlike or mysterious." Lyra smiled, her lips curling slightly, though it was clear her smile wasn't one of amusement. "Your stories often focus on the extremes. Many beings in the universe are peaceful, like my species. But that does not mean we are perfect. We face our challenges just as you do. Jason found her words intriguing. He had always assumed that alien life would be cold, indifferent, or even hostile. Yet here was Lyra, calm, thoughtful, and genuinely interested in understanding humans. As he watched her work, he couldn't help but feel a growing sense of respect for her. She wasn't just some experiment sent to observe him. She was a person in her own way. "You mentioned you were here to learn about humans," Jason said, leaning against the kitchen counter. "What exactly are you learning?" Lyra looked up, her expression thoughtful. "I am learning about your culture, your emotions, your technology, and how you interact with each other. We have studied your planet from afar for many years, but there is no substitute for direct experience." Jason nodded, but a thought lingered in his mind. "What about your mission? Aren't you supposed to report back to your people?" Lyra's eyes darkened for a moment, but it was fleeting. She returned to her task, picking up a dish towel and folding it neatly. "I am still following my mission, yes, but my priorities have shifted. Over time, I have come to understand things about your world that I did not expect." Jason frowned, sensing there was more to her words than she was letting on. "What do you mean by that?" Lyra paused, turning toward him with a serious expression. "When I first arrived, my only goal was to assist you and learn about your world. But I have come to realize that there is more to this place, more to humans, than what my people expected. I have seen emotions in you that I did not anticipate. Love, fear, joy, and sorrow. These emotions are far more complex than what we believed." Jason's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't expected her to open up like this, and it made him feel something he hadn't felt in a long time, an unexpected connection. "You've been watching humans for a while, haven't you?" Lyra nodded. "Yes, from a distance, but there is a difference between watching and experiencing." Jason couldn't help but feel that her words carried more weight than he could fully understand. He had spent his life in a small corner of Earth, focused on his work and daily routines. Yet here was Lyra, an alien from another galaxy, experiencing the world in ways he never had. He couldn't stop himself from asking, "So what's it like for you, being so far from your home?" Lyra's expression softened. "It is challenging, but it is also an opportunity. On Zinthar, we have everything we need, but we lack the variety of experiences you have here. Your planet is full of contrast, beautiful and dangerous, full of joy and pain. There is a depth here that we cannot experience on our own world." Jason couldn't help but be intrigued by her perspective. He had always seen Earth as just Earth, his home. But to Lyra, it was something entirely different, something beautiful, even in its flaws. As the day went on, Jason found himself spending more time with Lyra, talking about his life, his work, and his thoughts. She listened with a patience he had never encountered before. She didn't interrupt, didn't offer advice unless he asked. She simply listened and understood, her quiet presence filling the space around them. Later in the afternoon, Jason made them both lunch. Lyra watched closely as he chopped vegetables, curious about how humans prepared their food. As he served the meal, she expressed her appreciation, though her interest was more in the process than the taste. "I can understand why you enjoy this," Lyra said, taking a careful bite. "There is a rhythm to it, a method." Jason chuckled. "Yeah, cooking is one of the few things that helps me relax." Lyra looked at him, her gaze thoughtful. "You seem to find comfort in routine, yet there are many things about you that are unpredictable. Why is that?" Jason paused, considering the question. "I guess I've always been a creature of habit, but I guess I'm also looking for something more. I don't know. Maybe something exciting, something different." Lyra nodded slowly, as if processing his words. "Perhaps you are looking for change. It is natural to want something beyond the familiar." The conversation lingered in the air, a quiet understanding growing between them. Jason had never felt so at ease talking to someone, especially not an alien, but with Lyra, it felt different. There was a sense of calm, of safety, that he couldn't quite explain. As the evening drew near, Jason found himself sitting on the couch, glancing over at Lyra as she continued to work. She had cleaned the apartment from top to bottom, leaving everything spotless. Yet, it wasn't just her skills that impressed him. It was her presence, the way she moved through his life with a calm, steady grace. For the first time in a long while, Jason felt like he wasn't alone. He had spent so much time isolating himself from others, convinced that being alone was the easiest way to avoid complications. But with Lyra, there were no complications. She was just there. And somehow, that made all the difference. The days passed by slowly, but in an unexpected way, they began to feel different. Jason had been living alone for so long, surrounded by the humdrum of his routine, that he hadn't realized how much he craved connection. At first, he had been skeptical of Lyra's presence. An alien girl as his maid? It seemed absurd. Yet, as the days stretched on, he couldn't help but feel a growing sense of companionship between them. Lyra was, by all accounts, the perfect maid. She cleaned, cooked, and took care of everything Jason had been neglecting for so long. But she was more than that. Lyra was kind, attentive, and surprisingly perceptive. She was always listening, always learning, and more importantly, she seemed to genuinely care about how Jason was feeling. One evening, as they sat together at the small dining table in Jason's apartment, Lyra asked a question that Jason hadn't expected. "Jason," she began, her voice soft but inquisitive, "do humans often find it difficult to understand their emotions?" Jason looked up from his meal, slightly taken aback by the question. He set down his fork, his eyes meeting hers. "What do you mean?" Lyra's blue eyes flickered with thought. "You seem conflicted. You have moments of joy, moments of frustration, and sometimes you seem lost. It's not always clear to me why you feel the way you do." Jason shifted in his seat, feeling a little uncomfortable under her gaze. He hadn't expected an alien to notice such things, let alone ask about them. But there was something about Lyra's presence, something calming, that made it easier, to be honest. Yeah, I do feel conflicted sometimes," Jason admitted. "Life isn't as simple as I thought it would be when I was younger. Things get complicated, and it's easy to lose track of what really matters. I guess that's why I ended up so focused on work and avoiding anything else. It felt easier." Lyra tilted her head slightly, her expression thoughtful. "It must be difficult to feel that way, Jason, to want to be close to others but to pull away at the same time." Jason's heart skipped a beat. It was exactly how he felt, but hearing Lyra speak it aloud made it feel more real. She understood him in a way that no one else had. "It's strange, isn't it?" Jason said, his voice quiet. "How we can want connection but still push people away. I guess I've been afraid of getting too close to anyone for a long time." Lyra's gaze softened, and she leaned back in her chair. "I have observed that humans often struggle with fear. Fear of loss, fear of change, fear of being hurt. It is a complicated emotion." Jason smiled weakly. "Yeah, that sounds about right." As the evening went on, Jason found himself opening up more than he had in years. He told Lyra about his childhood, his dreams, and the reasons why he had shut himself off from others. He explained how his parents had always pushed him to succeed, to follow a strict path. But despite their expectations, he never felt truly fulfilled. Instead, he had buried himself in work, avoiding any deeper connections that might have caused him to feel vulnerable. Lyra listened intently, never interrupting, never judging. She simply absorbed his words, her presence soothing in a way that made Jason feel lighter with every sentence he spoke. It was as if, For the first time in his life, someone truly understood him. "What about you, Lyra?" Jason asked, once he had finished sharing his story. "What was your life like back on Zinthar?" Lyra looked down at her hands for a moment before responding. "On Zinthar, my people live in harmony with one another. There is no war, no conflict. We are taught to understand one another, to listen, to observe. We are always learning." Jason raised an eyebrow. "No conflict? That sounds almost perfect." Lyra's expression remained calm, though her eyes seemed to hold a trace of something deeper. "Perfection can be a burden. In a society without conflict, there is little room for growth. Everything is understood, everything is known. And yet, there is a yearning for something more, a need to experience the unknown." Jason frowned. "That sounds lonely." Lyra's eyes met his, and for the first time, Jason saw a flicker of vulnerability in her gaze. "It can be, but it is also peaceful. In a way, it allows us to learn in ways that humans might not be able to." Jason leaned forward, intrigued. "So, how do you feel about being here? On Earth?" Lyra paused, and Jason could see the conflict in her eyes. "At first, I was only here to observe, to learn from a distance without truly experiencing. But now," she trailed off, her voice soft. "Now I have begun to feel things I did not expect. I have begun to understand emotions in a way that is new to me." Jason's heart raced. There was a hint of something in her words that made him pause. Lyra, the alien from another world, was experiencing emotions that she had never felt before. And it seemed like she was beginning to understand the complexities of human connections. Jason didn't know why, but he felt a deep sense of responsibility toward her. He wanted to protect her, to help her navigate this new world. But more than that, he found himself caring about her in a way he hadn't cared for anyone in a long time. "Lyra," Jason said quietly, "do you ever feel like you don't belong?" Lyra's eyes widened slightly, and she blinked before responding. "Sometimes. I do not belong on Earth, but I do not belong on Zinthar either. I am somewhere in between. I have become connected to this place, to its people, to you." Jason's breath caught in his chest. He hadn't expected her to say that, not in the way she had. It was as if, in some strange way, they were both out of place, strangers in their own worlds, trying to find a sense of belonging in something new. Without thinking, Jason reached across the table, his hand hovering near hers. "You're not alone," he said softly. Lyra's gaze softened, and for a moment they simply stared at one another. There was something unspoken between them, something that neither of them could quite put into words. But Jason felt it, the connection, the bond that was growing between them. It was as if they had both found something they had been missing, something they hadn't known they needed. As the days went on, Jason and Lyra's bond continued to grow. They spent more time together, talking about their lives, their worlds, and their hopes for the future. Jason found himself looking forward to each day, not because of the chores that Lyra completed, but because of the quiet companionship she offered. She was no longer just a maid to him, she was a friend, someone who understood him in a way no one else had. In return, Lyra learned more about the human experience, about the emotions and connections that defined Jason's world. She began to see the beauty in the chaos, the way that humans could love and fight and laugh all at once. She began to understand the depth of human relationships, something her peaceful society on Zinthar had never fully grasped. One evening as they sat, together watching the sunset outside Jason's apartment, Lyra turned to him and spoke quietly. "Jason, I have learned much during my time here, but I believe there is still more for me to understand." Jason nodded, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "I think we're both still figuring things out." Lyra smiled softly. Perhaps that is the beauty of it. The unknown. The quiet, calm life that Jason had started to build with Lyra was disrupted one afternoon by an unexpected knock at the door. Jason had been working in his small office space, going over some emails when he heard the sound. It wasn't the usual doorbell. It was a sharp, urgent knock. His heart skipped a beat as he glanced toward Lyra, who was sitting at the kitchen counter quietly reading a book. Lyra looked up, sensing Jason's sudden tension. "Who is it?" she asked in her calm, melodic voice. Jason swallowed, still unsure. "I'm not sure. I wasn't expecting anyone." He stood up and walked toward the door, feeling a strange knot in his stomach. As he reached for the door handle, he glanced back at Lyra. She had set her book aside and stood up, watching him with a quiet intensity. She had always been observant, and Jason couldn't help but feel her attention on him as he opened the door. Standing on the other side of the door was a man in a sharp suit, his expression stern and serious. He was tall, with short-cropped dark hair, and his eyes held a cold, calculating look. Behind him, Jason could see two other figures, their faces hidden under hoods, their postures rigid and imposing. "Can I help you?" Jason asked, his voice a little shakier than he would have liked. The man in the suit didn't smile. "We need to speak with the alien. Lyra, is it?" Jason felt a cold shiver run down his spine. His first instinct was to close the door and protect Lyra, but he knew he couldn't do that. These people weren't just anyone. They were here for Lyra, and Jason wasn't sure what their intentions were. "She's in here," Jason said, his voice steady but tinged with unease. The man nodded, and without another word, he and his companions entered the apartment. Jason stepped back to give them space, but his mind was racing. Who were these people? How did they know about Lyra? And why did they want to speak with her? Lyra had already stepped forward to greet them. Her calm demeanor never wavered, but Jason could sense a subtle tension in her posture. She stood with her hands folded in front of her, as though she were preparing for something she wasn't sure she could control. The man in the suit took a moment to look her over, his eyes narrowing slightly. "You are the one who has been learning about humans, correct?" he asked. Lyra nodded slowly. "Yes, I have been here to observe and assist, as I was sent to do." The man didn't seem satisfied with her answer. "You were sent here to gather information. You were not sent here to form emotional connections with humans. You know the rules." Jason could feel the tension in the room grow. It was clear that these people weren't here to be friendly. They weren't here to help. They were here to take something from Lyra, or perhaps to force her back to wherever she came from. "Who are you?" Jason asked, his voice firm, though his heart was pounding. "What do you want with her?" The man turned toward Jason, his gaze sharp. "We are part of an organization that oversees the activities of beings like Lyra. She was sent here on a mission, and it seems she has strayed from that mission. She has formed a connection with you, and that is unacceptable." Jason felt a wave of protectiveness wash over him. "Lyra is not just some tool for you to control. She's a person. She has a right to choose what she wants." The man's face darkened. "You misunderstand. This isn't about choice. This is about protocol. Lyra was not meant to engage with humans in this way. Her mission was to observe, not to get involved." Jason glanced at Lyra, who stood silently, her expression unreadable. He wanted to say something, to argue, but he could see that she wasn't afraid of these people. It was as though she had been expecting this moment all along. "I will not go back with you," Lyra said suddenly, her voice unwavering. "I have learned more than I was meant to. I have made my choice." The man's expression hardened, but there was a flicker of surprise in his eyes. He clearly hadn't expected Lyra to speak so boldly. "You don't have a choice, Lyra. You're coming with us. It's for your own safety." Lyra shook her head, taking a step back from the group. "No, my safety is not at risk. I am not a prisoner here." I am free to make my own decisions." Jason watched the exchange, feeling a knot in his stomach. He didn't know who these people were, but he could see that they were not going to leave without a fight, and he wasn't about to let them take Lyra without a struggle. "Get out of my apartment," Jason said, his voice calm but firm. The man in the suit gave him a cold smile. "You don't understand the situation, human. This is not a request. We don't take no for an answer." Without warning, the man moved toward Lyra, his hand outstretched as though to grab her. Jason stepped forward, instinctively moving to stand between them. "Stay away from her!" Jason shouted, his heart racing. He didn't know what he was going to do, but he knew he couldn't let these people take Lyra. Lyra's eyes flashed, with a quiet intensity. She moved quickly, stepping beside Jason and placing a hand on his shoulder. "It's okay, Jason," she said softly. "I can handle this." Jason glanced at her, confusion and concern in his eyes. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to make sure they leave," Lyra said, her voice calm and steady. She turned to face the man in the suit. "You will not take me back. I have made my decision." The man's eyes narrowed. "You don't have a choice, Lyra." Before anyone could react, Lyra raised her hand, and Jason felt a strange wave of energy wash over the room. The air seemed to hum with an unseen force, and the man and his companions froze in place, their eyes wide with surprise. Jason watched, stunned, as Lyra held them in place with nothing more than a quiet, focused gaze. "I told you," Lyra said softly. "I will not go back with you." The man opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. It was as though his voice had been taken away. "Leave! Now!" Lyra said, her voice commanding. For a long moment, there was silence. Then, the man and his companions slowly stepped back, still unable to move. With a final glare at Jason and Lyra, they turned and left the apartment, the door closing behind them with a soft click. Jason stood frozen in place, his mind racing. He hadn't expected this. He hadn't expected Lyra to have the ability to control them like that. But now that it was over, he felt a strange mixture of relief and confusion. Lyra turned to him, her expression softening. "Are you all right?" she asked. Jason nodded slowly, still trying to process what had just happened. "Yeah, I'm fine, but what was that? How did you do that?" Lyra looked down, her expression thoughtful. "I did not want to hurt them, but I had to. Make sure they understood that I am not going back. I am not a prisoner." Jason could see the resolve in her eyes. She had made up her mind, and nothing was going to change that. But he also saw something else, a hint of sadness, a reminder that this was not just a simple choice for her. She had been sent here for a reason, and now she was defying that purpose. "I'm glad you're here, Lyra," Jason said softly. "I don't want you to go." The days following the encounter with the mysterious group had left Jason feeling uneasy. Lyra had remained calm and composed throughout the entire event, but Jason couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her story than she had let on. She had used her powers to defend herself, something he hadn't known she was capable of before. But now, more than ever, Jason was aware that the quiet life he had shared with Lyra was becoming far more complicated than he had ever imagined, as the sun set one evening, casting a warm glow across the apartment. Jason sat on the couch, his mind racing with questions. Lyra had been acting distant the past few days. She still did her usual tasks, cooking, cleaning, and keeping him company, but there was a quiet sadness in her eyes that Jason couldn't ignore. He knew she was holding something back, and it was beginning to weigh on him. "Lyra," Jason said softly, breaking the silence between them. She was sitting at the kitchen table, her hands folded neatly in front of her as she stared out the window. "I need to know the truth. You've been distant, and I can tell there's something you're not telling me." Lyra turned to face him, her eyes wide, as if she hadn't expected him to ask. "What do you mean?" she replied, her voice calm. But there was a hint of uncertainty. Jason stood up and walked over to where she was sitting. "I've been thinking a lot about everything that's happened. I know you're not just a maid. I know there's more to you than you've said. And I need to understand what that is." Lyra sighed, her gaze dropping to the table. "Jason, there are things you don't know. Things that I haven't told you because I wasn't sure if I could. I never meant to deceive you, but my mission was never as simple as it seemed." Jason sat down across from her, his heart pounding in his chest. "What mission? What are you really here for, Lyra?" She took a deep breath, her fingers tapping nervously against the table. "I was sent to observe humans. My people believed that understanding your species could help us prepare for potential interactions with your world. But over time, something changed." Jason's mind raced. "Changed? What do you mean?" Lyra looked at him, her eyes filled with something Jason couldn't quite place. Regret? Guilt? "I didn't expect to feel anything. I was programmed to be impartial, to learn without becoming involved. But then I met you, and I saw the way you lived, your struggles, your joys, your complexities. I began to understand what it meant to care, to feel connected to someone." Jason was silent for a moment, absorbing her words. It was hard to believe, hard to wrap his mind around the idea that she had been sent here on some kind of mission, but he could see it in her eyes, the honesty, the vulnerability. He had no doubt that what she was saying was true. "So, you were never supposed to get close to me?" Jason asked, his voice quiet. Lyra shook her head slowly. "No, I was never supposed to become emotionally involved. But over time I realized that I had crossed a line. I had become too attached, too connected to you." Jason felt his heart tighten. He had known there was something special about the way he and Lyra had bonded. He had known it wasn't just about the chores or the conversations. It was about something deeper. He had never imagined that she felt the same way. "But why didn't you tell me this before?" Jason asked, a hint of frustration in his voice. "Why keep it a secret?" Lyra looked down at her hands, her face softening. "I didn't want to hurt you. I thought that if I told you the truth, you would push me away. I thought you would see me as just another alien, another being sent here with an agenda. But I didn't want that. I wanted to be human, just for a while." Jason reached across the table, his hand hovering near hers. "You don't have to be human, Lyra. You are who you are, and whatever you've been sent here for, it doesn't change the fact that you've become important to me. I care about you." Lyra's eyes met his, and for a moment the world seemed to fall away. There was no mission, no alien agenda. There was just the two of them, standing on the edge of something neither of them fully understood. She took a deep breath and smiled. A small, genuine smile that made Jason's heart race. "Thank you," she said softly. "I never expected you to accept me, not like this." Jason smiled back. "Why wouldn't I? You're not just some mission. You're..." "You?" Lyra's smile faltered slightly as she looked away, her gaze drifting toward the window. "There's more, Jason. The people who came to the door, the ones who tried to take me, they are part of a larger organization. They are monitoring my every move, making sure I follow the rules. They don't understand why I'm staying here, why I'm changing." Jason's stomach twisted. "So what does that mean? Are they going to come after you again?" Lyra nodded slowly. "Yes. They will not stop until I return to their control. But I cannot go back. I have learned too much. I have chosen this life, this connection with you. and I will not let anyone take that away from me." Jason's heart raced. He hadn't known this side of Lyra before, the quiet strength, the determination behind her words. He had always thought of her as someone who needed protection, but now he realized that she was just as strong, if not stronger, than anyone he knew. "So, what do we do now?" Jason asked, his voice low but filled with resolve. Lyra met his gaze again, her eyes steady. "We have to be careful. The people who came for me are not the only ones. There are others who will be watching, others who will try to take me back. We can't let them know where we are or what we're doing." Jason nodded. He wasn't sure what he was agreeing to, but he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to let Lyra face this alone. Whatever came next, they would face it together. "I won't let them take you," Jason said firmly. "You've chosen to be here, and I'm not going to let anyone take that away from you." Lyra smiled, a look of gratitude crossing her face. "Thank you, Jason. I don't know what I would do without you." Jason stood up, walking over to the window. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the city below. It was peaceful, quiet. But Jason knew that peace wouldn't last forever. There were dangers lurking, things they couldn't control. But at that moment, with Lyra by his side, Jason felt like maybe they could face anything together. "Whatever happens," Jason said, turning back to Lyra, "we'll figure it out. Together." The days following their conversation were filled with tension. Jason and Lyra had known that the peaceful life they had been building could not last forever. But they hadn't expected the danger to arrive so soon. The shadow of the faction that had tried to take Lyra back loomed over them. They had been careful, staying inside, keeping a low profile, but Jason knew it wasn't enough. Lyra wasn't just any alien. She was part of something larger, something Jason didn't fully understand, and the people who had come for her would stop at nothing to take her back. One afternoon, as they sat in the living room discussing their next steps, there was a sudden knock at the door. Jason's heart skipped a beat. Lyra, who had been quiet for most of the day, tensed up beside him. "Who could that be?" Jason asked, his voice barely a whisper. Lyra stood, her body still, her eyes narrowing as she listened intently. "It's them," she said quietly. "The faction." Jason's blood ran cold. He had known this moment would come, but he hadn't been prepared for how quickly it had arrived. The knock came again, this time more insistent. "I'm going to check," Jason said, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at him. Lyra shook her head. "No, you stay here. I'll handle it." Jason opened his mouth to argue, but Lyra raised a hand, her gaze firm. "They are coming for me, not you. I won't let them take you. Stay hidden." Jason nodded, his stomach twisting. He didn't want to be left behind, but he knew Lyra was right. He couldn't afford to risk her safety by getting involved in what was coming. As he moved toward the kitchen, Lyra turned toward the door, her posture calm but alert. She didn't knock or ring the bell. Instead, she opened the door with a swift, decisive motion, standing in front of it with a look of unwavering determination. Standing at the doorway were 3 people. They were all dressed in dark clothing, their faces partially obscured by hoods. The leader, the man from before, was at the front. His eyes were cold, but this time there was something else in them. A hint of desperation. "You don't belong here," the man said, his voice low but filled with authority. "It's time to return with us, Lyra." Lyra stood her ground, her gaze steady. "I told you before. I will not go back with you. I have made my choice. I belong here." The man's eyes flickered briefly to the apartment behind her, as though assessing the situation. "You don't understand the consequences of your actions. Your mission was clear. You were sent to observe, not to engage. You've gone beyond your orders, and now there are those who will not let you stay here." Jason, hidden in the kitchen, strained his ears, trying to catch every word. He could hear the tension in Lyra's voice as she responded. I understand perfectly. I've learned what I needed to, but I will not go back. I have chosen my path. The leader's jaw tightened. You don't have a choice. You're coming with us, whether you want to or not. Lyra's expression softened, but there was no fear in her eyes, only resolve. I will not be taken. Not by you, not by anyone. Jason felt a strange surge of admiration for her. She had come so far from the quiet, reserved alien girl he had met. She had grown stronger, more confident, and now she was standing up for herself in a way Jason had never expected. The man's patience seemed to be wearing thin. You are a threat, Lyra, a liability. The longer you stay here, the more dangerous it becomes for both of us. You can't hide forever. I'm not hiding, Lyra replied, her voice steady. I'm living. I've learned more in the time I've spent here than I ever could have back home. Jason could hear the frustration in the man's voice as he took a step forward. Enough. Step aside. Lyra didn't move. Instead, she held her ground, her eyes narrowing. I will not. There was a tense silence. Jason's heart raced as he waited, unsure of what would happen next. He wanted to rush out there to protect Lyra, but he knew he had to trust her. She had faced danger before. She could handle this. Finally, the man's voice broke the silence. If you won't come willingly, we will make you. Before Jason could react, he heard a soft humming sound fill the room. It was barely audible at first, but it quickly grew louder. The air around them seemed to shimmer with energy. Jason felt it. A strange electric charge in the atmosphere. Lyra raised her hand and the sound stopped instantly. The three people standing at the door were frozen in place, their eyes wide with surprise. Lyra stood unmoving, her gaze steady, as she looked at the leader. You will leave now, she said quietly, her voice calm but firm. You will not return. Not today, not ever. Jason stood there astonished. He had never seen Lyra's powers like this before. She had always been calm and composed. But now she was taking control of the situation in a way he couldn't fully comprehend. The man in the suit opened his mouth, but no words came out. His body remained still, caught in some invisible force. Leave, Lyra repeated, her voice carrying a quiet authority. After what seemed like an eternity, the man nodded slowly. With a final glare at Lyra, he motioned for the others to follow him. They turned and left without another word, their footsteps fading as they walked away from the apartment. Jason couldn't believe what he had just witnessed. He stepped out. From his hiding place, his eyes wide with shock. Lyra! What was that? Lyra turned to him, her face softening. It's just a precaution. I don't want to hurt anyone, but they need to understand that I am not going back. Jason approached her, his mind still reeling from the events. That was incredible, he said. I had no idea you could do something like that. Lyra shrugged, a slight smile tugging at her lips. There is much you don't know about me, but I only use these abilities when I have no other choice. I don't want to harm anyone. I just want to live. Jason took a deep breath, trying to process everything. He had always known there was more to Lyra than met the eye, but now, seeing her in action, he realized just how much more there was. She was not just an alien from another world. She was a force to be reckoned with. So what now? Jason asked, his voice quieter than before. What do we do next? Lyra looked out the window, her expression thoughtful. We leave. We can't stay here anymore. They will come back, and next time they may not be so easy to stop. Jason nodded. He had known this day would come, but now that it was here, he realized how little he truly understood about the world Lyra came from. The people after her were powerful, dangerous, and determined to get her back. But Lyra wasn't going down. Without a fight, "We'll figure this out," Jason said, his voice full of determination. "We'll get through this together." Lyra turned to him, her gaze steady. "Together," she repeated, a small smile appearing on her face. Jason knew that no matter what happened next, he wasn't going to let Lyra face this alone. They had come too far, and he wasn't about to let the people who were hunting her take her away. The days after their narrow escape had been a blur. Jason and Lyra had packed up and left the apartment, moving to a secluded location where they could stay hidden, at least for the time being. They knew it wouldn't be long before the faction came searching for them again. They couldn't afford to be found, not with the kind of power the faction held, but they were determined to stay free, to live the life they had chosen together. Jason sat at a small table in their temporary hideout, staring out the window at the quiet street below. It was strange to think about how much had changed in such a short amount of time. Just a few weeks ago, he had been living a quiet, predictable life. Now his world was filled with uncertainty, with danger lurking around every corner, and yet he felt more alive than he had in years. Lyra sat across from him, her gaze focused on the small device she had been studying. It was a piece of advanced technology she had found in one of the abandoned buildings they had taken refuge in. Jason didn't fully understand it, but Lyra seemed to know exactly how to operate it. She had become more resourceful since they had started their journey together, her knowledge of human technology expanding as she learned more about Earth and its people. "How are you holding up?" Jason asked, breaking the silence. Lyra looked up, her eyes softening as she met his gaze. "I'm fine," she said quietly. "It's just strange being here, being away from everything I've ever known." Jason nodded. He could understand that. Lyra had come from a place where everything was peaceful, controlled, and now she was living in a world filled with chaos, with constant danger. He couldn't imagine how that must feel for her. "I know it's not easy," Jason said, "but you're not alone. I'm here and I'll do whatever it takes to make sure we're safe." Lyra smiled, a small but genuine smile. "I know. I'm grateful for that." There was a long pause as they both sat in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Jason couldn't help but think about what had happened, about how they had gotten to this point. He had never expected any of this. He had never imagined that his life would be turned upside down by an alien girl who had come to Earth as part of some mission. But here they were, together, facing challenges that neither of them had been prepared for. "I've been thinking," Jason said after a while. "We can't keep running forever. Sooner or later they'll find us. We need to make a plan. Way to stop them for good." Lyra looked at him, her expression serious. "I agree. We can't keep hiding, but we also can't face them alone. They have too much power. We need help." Jason leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. He had never been one to ask for help, never been one to trust others easily. But this was different. Lyra wasn't just any alien. She was someone he cared about, someone who had become a part of his life. And he wasn't going to let anyone take her away from him. "Do you have any ideas?" Jason asked. Lyra nodded slowly. "I have contacts. People who might be able to help. Some of them are from my world, others are from Earth. They're all people who believe in freedom, in protecting those who can't protect themselves. I've been in contact with them before, but I was never supposed to get involved with them directly. I was just a witness. But now..." She paused, her voice softening. "Now I'm ready to do whatever it takes to stop the faction." Jason could see the determination in her eyes. It wasn't the same quiet resolve he had seen before. This time it was something more, something fiercer. Lyra had made her choice, and nothing was going to change that. She wasn't going back to the life she had been sent to lead. She was going to fight for her freedom, and Jason was going to be right there with her. "So, what's the plan?" Jason asked. Lyra stood up, walking over to the small device on the table. "We need to find a way to stop the faction from tracking us. They have technology that allows them to monitor our movements, to track us wherever we go. If we can disable their systems, if we can cut off their ability to find us, we'll have a chance." Jason felt a surge of hope. He had never been much of a strategist, but Lyra's calm, methodical approach was starting to make sense. She had the knowledge and the skills he didn't even know she had, and together, they could make a plan that might just work. "I'm with you," Jason said, his voice firm. "Let's do it. Let's take them down." Lyra looked at him, her expression softening. "Thank you, Jason. I don't think I could do this alone." Jason smiled. "You don't have to. We're in this together." Over the next few days, they began putting their plan into action. Lyra contacted her allies, people who could help them navigate the hidden world of resistance movements. Some of them were humans, others were from different planets, but they all had one thing in common. They were committed to fighting back against the forces that sought to control them. Jason felt like a fish out of water as they made plans and prepared for what was to come. He had never been involved in anything like this before. He was just a regular guy. But with Lyra by his side, he felt a sense of purpose, a sense of determination that he hadn't known he had. Together, they were more than just a human and an alien. They were a team, bound by a shared goal. The day they had set for the operation finally arrived. Jason and Lyra, along with their new allies, made their way to an abandoned facility on the outskirts of the city. The place had once been a hub of activity, but now it was deserted, its walls covered in graffiti and dust. It was the perfect place to execute their plan. They split up, each taking a different section of the facility to disable the faction's tracking systems. Jason, with Lyra's guidance, worked his way through the building, following the instructions she had given him. He wasn't sure how to do everything she asked, but she had explained it in simple terms, and he trusted her completely. After what felt like hours, they finally made it to the central control room. Lyra stepped forward, her eyes scanning the room as she accessed the control panel. Jason stood back, watching her work. There was something almost otherworldly about her in that moment. Focused, powerful, and completely in control. "I've got it," Lyra said, her voice calm. "I've disabled their tracking systems. They won't be able to find us now." Jason let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "We did it," he said, his voice full of relief. Lyra turned to him, her eyes bright. "We did it." "But this is just the beginning." Jason nodded. They had taken the first step, but there was still a long way to go. The faction wouldn't give up easily, but for the first time in a long time, Jason felt like they had a fighting chance. As they walked out of the facility, their hearts light with the knowledge that they had succeeded, Jason couldn't help but look at Lyra with a deep sense of gratitude. She had changed his life in ways he never could have imagined. She had shown him that there was more to life than routine, more to the world than he had ever known. And now, together, they were going to take on the faction and win. "No matter what happens," Jason said, his voice steady, "I'll be by your side. Always." Lyra smiled, a soft, genuine smile that made Jason's heart swell. "And I will be by yours." As the sun began to set on the horizon, they stood together, ready to face whatever came next. Together they were unstoppable,